Attention, people who still care. How can us average citizens fix our broken financial system without using politicians or regulations? This is the question we ask on the Crowd Effect podcast. I am your host, Paul Lovejoy, licensed investment advisor at Stakeholder Enterprise. On today's show, the state of Oklahoma placed the four largest banks, which control half of all the banking assets in the United States, on a list restricting them from state owned contracts valued at more than $100,000 because the state of Oklahoma believes that they are engaging in boycotts against fossil fuel companies. But before we talk about that, I first want to tell a story. In the early 1990s, California was experiencing a severe drought. In an effort to conserve water, the state government launched a campaign to encourage residents to conserve water. The campaign was successful in reducing water consumption, but it also had a number of unintended consequences. One of the unintended consequences of the campaign was that it led to a decrease in investment in water infrastructure. Because residents were using less water, there was less need for new water pipes and reservoirs. This decrease in investment made it difficult to meet state water needs during future droughts. Another unintended consequence of the campaign was that it led to a decrease in agriculture production. Because farmers were using less water, they were producing less food. And this decrease in agriculture production led to higher food prices and a decrease in the state's economy. The 1990s California Water Conservation Campaign is an example of well intended government policy can have unintended consequences. So, this leads me into our story of the day, which is Oklahoma placing the four major banks on this list. So, this has to do with a law that was passed in Oklahoma last year. And the law is called the Oklahoma ESG Disclosure Act. And what it does, it prohibits financial institutions from considering ESG factors when making investment decisions or providing financial services. So, ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance practices. So, the financial sector has criticized this law, arguing that it's unconstitutional and will harm the economy. The industry has also argued that the law is unnecessary because financial institutions have fiduciary duty in the first place. They are obligated to maximize the financial return of its customers and clientele. So, the Oklahoma ESG Disclosure Act is one of a number of laws that have been passed in recent years that restrict ESG investing. So that also includes Kentucky, West Virginia, and Texas have also had some similar laws. So, some arguments that are made by the financial sector of this Oklahoma ESG Disclosure Act are that the law is unconstitutional and it violates the First Amendment by prohibiting financial institutions from protecting from expressing their views on ESG issues. They also argued that the law will harm the economy because it discourages investment and economic growth into alternative energy sources. So, the Oklahoma ESG Disclosure Act and the California Water Conservation Campaign are two examples of well intended government policies that have had unintended consequences. Well, the California policy did have unintended consequences, and the Oklahoma ESG Disclosure Act will have unintended consequences. So, this Oklahoma law prohibiting financial institutions from considering these ESG factors. This was passed in an effort to protect the state's oil and gas industry, which is a major source of jobs and revenue for Oklahoma. Now, I lived in Oklahoma for 6 years, And I have nothing but positive things to say in general about the people of Oklahoma. I found them generous and welcoming and heartwarming. And the city where I lived in Edmond, had such a rich sense of community, and people looked out for one another there. And I am very fond of my memories and the people that I have got to know in Oklahoma. So these two, the California example and the Oklahoma example, are very similar in that they're both restricting investment into the future. So at some point, um, oil and gas will likely be replaced by a more economically viable alternative due to a breakthrough in technology. So, this breakthrough could be in the form of a new type of energy, such as fusion, or it will be in the form of a new way to store energy, such as a different type of battery. So when this breakthrough does happen, it's going to have a major impact on the Oklahoma economy. And if they haven't prepared in and invested in this new alternative energy source, well, it's going to have devastating consequences to the people of Oklahoma. And now it doesn't go without saying that there's going to be challenges when a transition from one energy source to another one. The oil and gas employs millions of people around the world, and these people they'll need to be retrained and reemployed in a new energy economy. And so this is a problem, and if Oklahoma isn't investing in this future energy, well, they're going to be left behind, hurting the people there. Now, there are a couple of things that I take away from this also. Number one, these four major banks, which are Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and Citigroup, they don't really care about the environment. The purpose of their corporation, they don't have a responsibility to the environment. There is no um, real effort to try and mitigate their environmental impact. In the last 20 years, these four banks have been fined almost $13 billion, according to the EPA. And if you consider all banks in the United States that do business in the United States, in the last 20 years, this industry has been fined over $100 billion. So no, the banks don't really care about the environment, and when they are presenting an image of caring, it's all show. It's greenwashing. They're ultimately, the way these banks are designed is like all for-profit corporations, which is to increase their quarterly profits for their shareholders. And this is what the financial institutions are saying to the state of Oklahoma. They're saying it. We don't care. Ultimately, we have a bottom line to our clients. So what could Oklahoma do? And this will lead into my financial tip of the day. Well, the problem is that there is this huge concentration of wealth uh, with these four major banks controlling half of all the banking assets. Oklahoma sees that as this power, and they're trying to control this power. But it doesn't work that way. It will never work that way. One way that it can work is if the people, you, me, us regular people, decentralize these banks via crowd lending. So, crowd lending is when regular people uh, group, a large group of people pool small amounts of money to fund loans. And there are very small investment minimums. Now, as a licensed investment advisor, I am bound by fiduciary duty as well. But I see crowd lending as a way to have it all, to be able to make a good market return, a risk adjusted market return, and also decentralize, dilute this concentration of power that these big banks have. And if the state of Oklahoma wants to do something about it, well, right now they're restricting the largest peer-to-peer lending platform in the United States from their residents. Uh, Prosper. If you live in Oklahoma, you can't invest in the crowd lending platform of Prosper. And this is probably one of the best ways to decentralize the power of these banks is by people becoming crowd lenders. It's also important to note when you're investing in crowd lending, you're not investing in the stock market and corporate bottom line. And so it's a positive cycle that happens, and it's so easy to become a crowd lender, and it's so easy to be diversified in crowd lending. And so that's my story of today of why Oklahoma is really shooting themselves in the foot, and what we can do to change this, take steps, is by becoming a crowd lender. That's one thing we can do. My name is Paul Lovejoy. I am a crowd investor, and I see you are one too. If you'd like to know how to fix our broken financial system legally, ethically, and without confrontation, go to stakeholderenterprise.com.